Welcome to Project U 2.2, the podcast where life and leadership meet endurance. I'm Greg Helmer, joined by my wife and partner in life and work, Carrie. Each week, we dive deep into the mindset, the neuroscience, and the real grit it takes to stop drifting and start living with clarity, confidence, and endurance. This is about real life, real struggles, and real growth. So lace up. It's time to live with endurance. If you had heard Carrie's message this week, she talked about noticing the breeze, those gentle whispers life sends before the storm forms. But sometimes, even when we're listening, the wind shifts faster than we can react. That's when endurance takes over, and that's where my story begins. It was the winter of 2013. I noticed hearing loss in my left ear, and sometimes I would bump into a corner while walking the halls at school or in my office. A subtle sign. Well, a good friend of mine looked me straight in the eye and said, "Greg, something's not right. You need an MRI." Well, foolishly, I shrugged it off. One more breeze I didn't want to feel. Neuroscience tells us our brains are designed to normalize discomfort. It's a protective instinct, a way of saying, "You're fine, keep going." But the same instinct that helps us endure can also keep us blind. That was my breeze turning point into a gust. By the spring of 2014, my symptoms multiplied. I had tingling in my face, fatigue, rising anxiety that I couldn't explain. Well, then came the phone call. "Greg," my doctor said, "are you sitting down? Your MRI shows a brain tumor." The wind was no longer whispering. It was howling. Minutes later, I was leading a staff meeting, smiling, encouraging, discussing curriculum, while inside my mind repeated one sentence: "I have a freaking brain tumor." That's leadership in real life. It's showing up for others when your own storm is raging inside. That night, I wept and I prayed. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want my wife and boys to carry that burden. Faith doesn't remove fear, it redefines it. It reminds us that even in chaos, we are never alone. Weeks later, Carrie and I met with a radiation oncologist. He leaned forward and he said calmly, "One option is 26 treatments of radiation." I didn't hear much after 26 because as a runner, that number means something. The distance of a marathon. And just like that, fear turned into focus. If this was 26.2, I could run it. Meaning actually changes biology. And when we attach purpose to pain, the brain releases energy through the process. Not just at the finish line. My treatments, they became a race plan. Before each session, I'd grab a cup of crushed ice, say a prayer, and I would visualize the tumor shrinking, and I would breathe deeply. By about the 7th or 8th treatment, the same table that once terrified me had become a place of stillness and prayer. And I'll never forget the scripture that my mom gave to me on an index card before one of my treatments. "Be still and know that I am God." You know, sometimes that stillness happens not in church, but beneath a radiation beam. Halfway through, doubt crept back in. Late one night, I woke up thinking, what if this radiation treatment is not working? My dad began driving me to my treatments. On one of those drives, he said, Hey, Greg, it's all down from here. The finish line, it's in sight. Psychologists call that co-regulation, when another person's calm becomes our courage. I call it fatherly faith. When school ended, Carrie and the boys actually came over to Grand Rapids with me, and they joined me for one of my radiation sessions. Before the mask was bolted down, I gave each boy a fist pump, and then Carrie's familiar 3-hand squeeze. I love you. That day, my prayer was a bit different. I prayed that if my family ever faced a storm like this, they would remember what endurance looks like. Suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character. And character, hope. And that became one of the mile markers in between each of my treatments. During those months, I kept leading. Only a handful of people knew what I was actually going through. I'll never forget, our human resource director once said, "Greg, I've never seen you more focused." Well, sometimes pain, when surrendered, it purifies your purpose. Radiation caused permanent hearing loss in my left ear, but it gave me something unexpected. It gave me perspective. Behind our house every spring, the spring peepers around our pond sing all night long. Now, by turning my left ear up on the pillow, I can sleep in perfect peace. Just ask Carrie. Mindset changes everything. Psychologists call it cognitive reappraisal. Faith calls it gratitude. When we change how we see the storm itself begins to change. And on July 7th of that summer, I had my final treatment. 26 milestones. The finish line for me. I'll admit, I was exhausted, but deeply grateful. Grateful for faith that held, for family that stood beside me, and for lessons that outlived the tumor. In Carrie's episode on Wednesday, she said the universe starts with a breeze to get our attention. Now I see those breezes everywhere, in my health, in my leadership, and in my relationships. You see, storms don't destroy what's anchored deep. I believe they reveal it. So here's your Project U 2.2 challenge this week. 1, identify your breeze. Where is life whispering right now? Maybe in your own health, your work, your faith, or some relationships. And 2, name your gust. What small frustration or ache have you been ignoring? And 3, anchor your response. Take one step this week. Schedule the appointment. Make the call. Write the note. Spend some time in prayer or meditation. You see, endurance isn't built by waiting for the hurricane. It's built by responding to the breeze. Awareness without action is just observation. Awareness with action, now that is growth. If Carrie helped you notice the breeze, I hope today helped you find strength in the storm. If this message resonated, share it with someone who needs hope today and invite them to join our Project U 2.2 community. You can learn more about one-on-one coaching, couples coaching, and our retreats at projectu22.org. And remember, every Wednesday at 6:22 a.m., Carrie brings her own powerful perspective on women, faith, and growth. This has been Project U 2.2, where we don't quit, we don't coast, and we don't surrender. Until next time, stay strong, stay real, and keep living with endurance. See you at 6:22.